It's not easy following up a big hit, but in Hollywood, it's just something you gotta do.
Fucking California.
In 1988, Die Hard surprised a whole lot of people by taking a TV star, putting him in a leading man role that none of the big movie stars wanted, and transforming the action genre forever.
Welcome to the party, pal!
Of course, it wasn't an instant classic, but it became obvious that a follow-up was needed sooner rather than later. How do you top such a movie with its unforgettable hero, its iconic villain, and its can't-miss concept? Well, they sure did give it a go, and we're gonna find out how when we investigate what the happened to Die Hard 2. And yes, that's its only title, Die Hard 2, but you're forgiven if you think the subtitle is Die Harder. And that's because the marketing for the film used that tagline to such an extent it became easy to assume it was an official part of the title. The irony is, it was going to be called Die Hard 2, Die Harder at one point, but Fox decided to simplify it about 5 months before the release. Returning producer Larry Gordon was evidently the only person who sensed that Die Hard was about to become a franchise.
Merry Christmas.
While the movie opened well and had a good run during the late summer of '88, it wasn't a runaway smash. Unlike today, studios didn't just automatically assume they were kickstarting IPs, and whether or not a movie was a hit couldn't be determined for several weeks, if not months. Hence, 20th Century Fox was going to pull the trigger on a sequel without obvious proof that the audience was demanding more John McClane.
Let the pros handle this.
Yeah, well, it looks like the pros are on the wrong team tonight.
But Gordon instinctively knew they had something special and began to think about a sequel. As with the first movie, Die Hard 2 would be adapted from a novel. This one, 58 Minutes by Walter Wager, about a New York cop forced to stop a terrorist who's holding JFK Airport hostage by taking over its air traffic control. A seemingly natural situation to plug McClane into.
And to crawl around this tin can.
Gordon turned to a newbie screenwriter named Doug Richardson to adapt the book. Richardson had no credits at that point, but was on the rise and would come quite cheap. According to Richardson, he was adapting the book as a Die Hard sequel without the studio's knowledge. They thought they were paying him for a 58 Minutes movie.
Nice guess, asshole. I'm a cop. That was a bad guy.
Where's your ID?
On its way to Cleveland?
After some weeks of being in the marketplace, it became clear that Die Hard was indeed a major success. When the new head of Fox finally announced that he wanted a Die Hard 2, Larry Gordon was able to say that they were way ahead of them, with the script he and Richardson had been developing all along. Sneaky, but smart, as they wouldn't have to spend several months searching for writers and cranking out a script for the sequel. Now, they could get this film ready for the summer of 1990.
Honey, it's the 90s, remember? Microchips, microwaves, faxes, airphones.
Hey, well, as far as I'm concerned, progress peaked with frozen pizza.
Once it was officially a Die Hard movie, that meant mega producer Joel Silver was back on board, indicating Doug Richardson's days were numbered. Silver frequently brought in screenwriter Steven D'Souza on his action films like 48 Hours, Commando, and the first Die Hard, and this situation would be no different. Richardson was let go and D'Souza was brought on to tailor the script to Silver's liking. The same exact thing happened on the first film, when D'Souza replaced that script's originator, Jeb Stewart.
Now you're the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Story of my life.
In terms of finding the right person to captain this ship, the first film's director, John McTiernan, was an obvious choice, but he was unavailable thanks to his commitments to The Hunt for Red October. Eventually, the job went to Renny Harlin, the Finnish director who Fox had tried to get to helm Alien 3. When that fell apart, he directed the Andrew Dice Clay vehicle, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, for the studio. The higher-ups were so impressed with the early footage that they asked Renny Harlin to jump into Die Hard 2. Problem was, Harlin only had mere weeks between wrapping Ford Fairlane and starting Die Hard 2. Making matters more complicated still, he would ultimately have to be involved in the post-production of both of them at the exact same time.
Why didn't I think of that? Cut, print, check the gate, moving on.
The turnaround for Die Hard 2 was gonna be tight.
Atta boy, we've got you.
Shooting commenced in November of 1989, and the film was targeting a late June debut the following year, a shockingly quick turnaround for a major blockbuster. If we're gonna go jump ahead a bit, the film wrapped in April of 1990, less than 3 months before its opening weekend. Naturally, the movie was being edited at the same time it was shooting in order to ease the tension, if ever so slightly.
Captain, please tell the tower. you will proceed as ordered.
Originally, the movie was to be set in New York, as the book was, but the decision was ultimately made to switch it to Washington, D.C. However, save for the exteriors of the airport, which were shot in Denver, all of the interior scenes were to be filmed at LAX in Los Angeles, while the airport was still catering to thousands of travelers a day.
Say I close in about an hour. Maybe we can go get a drink?
Just the facts, man. Just the facts.
During the scenes where extras had to scramble around the airport in panic, the production team was careful not to cause a real panic at the airport, using code words to spur them into action as opposed to having Renny shouting into his bullhorn, which they feared might frighten unknowing bystanders.
Beep, beep, coming through. Hey, Notre Dame, move it or lose it. Will the owner of the great big butt please move it out of my face?
These scenes were also shot in the very early hours of the morning, 3 or 4 a.m., when the airport was at its quietest. Naturally, Bruce Willis was to reprise the role as John McClane, which made him a bona fide movie star. Willis was going to get $7.5 million for Die Hard 2, a nice raise after the $5 he got for the first, which is seen as a lot as someone who wasn't an A-lister. The film's budget was allegedly in the $65 to $70 million range, making it one of the most expensive movies ever made at the time. As with the first film, Willis was going to be spitting out one-liners and clever quips throughout the movie, and he would have free reins to ad-lib McClane's sardonic dialogue when he saw fit.
Another basement, another elevator. How could the same shit happen to the same guy twice?
Playing the villain would be William Sadler, who wasn't exactly a household name, but then again, neither was Alan Rickman when he played Hans Gruber.
Colonel Stewart, can we have a few words, please?
You can have two. And you.
No pictures, you pinko bitch.
Sadler found out his introductory scene would see him doing Tai Chi in a hotel room while naked, which was Harlin's idea, prompting the actor to ask his director to shoot the scene towards the end of production so he could get into some shape. Sadler ended up getting in such good shape that it encouraged Harlin to change his diet and lifestyle in order to replicate what he saw from the dedicated actor. The film's other main villain, General Esperanza, was played by Django himself, Franco Nero.
Freedom. Not yet.
How he got involved is one of the many classic Joel Silver stories. Apparently, the two men had the same accountant, and said accountant had posters of Nero's movies all over his walls. After seeing this, Silver decided he wanted Nero in his film, but the actor had a conflict in his schedule. Plus, he didn't like the script very much after it was sent to him. Silver then repeatedly called Nero, screaming at him and demanding he do the movie. He kept at it until Nero threw his hands up and agreed. For a man like Silver, persistence obviously pays off. Intriguingly, actress Linda Fiorentino was reportedly being wooed to star in the film as soon as 1 month before shooting began, and since it obviously didn't come to fruition, it's still unclear which character she would have portrayed.
I hate the living.
Perhaps pesky reporter Samantha Coleman, eventually played by Sheila McCarthy, who helps McClane out at the end of the film. In a head-scratching mistake, her character in the end credit is listed as Samantha Copeland, not Coleman. Whoops. The majority of the interiors were shot on the Fox lot in LA. No big deal there. It was the exteriors that proved to be a major problem. Since the film takes place in December in Washington, D.C., a little snow would be needed, if for no other reason than added atmosphere. The issue was, that winter was a notoriously warm one in North America. The production had planned on shooting most of its exteriors in Denver, Colorado, where you'd expect plenty of snow, but nothing doing there. They traveled to Washington State, to Michigan, to Canada, in hopes of getting their snow, most of the time to no avail. More often than not, they had to import snow from Canada, or rely on fake snow in the form of detergent, plastic, or potato flakes. Things did get cold, however. The final scene, where John reunites with wife Holly, was shot in Colorado in sub-zero conditions. It was so cold that the film was freezing in the camera, and Willis's makeup was freezing to his face. It didn't help much that Willis and Bonabedelia are barely bundled up for this scene, and the moment where a blanket is thrown over them as they embrace was put in there because the actors genuinely needed protection from the elements.
John, why does this keep happening to us?
While real planes were used for several sequences, the majority of the planes you see in the final product are 20-foot models. The airport runways were miniature sets built in LA, and in the commentary track for the film, Harlin notes that several notable Hollywood big shots, including his idol Martin Scorsese, would often stop by the set to check out the impressive undertaking. All told, it reportedly took Industrial Light and Magic over 6 months to craft the various exciting explosions and other effects seen in the film. One of the movie's standout sequences, certainly its most disturbing one, is when the evil Colonel Stewart crashes a passenger jet in order to prove he means business. In Doug Richardson's script, it was a UPS plane with only 2 pilots, but it was eventually decided to be a plane filled with people. This was something Harlin fought for, and the studio was very much against it, because they thought the sequence would be so traumatic that the audience would tune out for the rest of the movie. Harlin held firm and got his way, though according to the director, the rough cut was even more disturbing, with passengers being flung around and set on fire. Pretty much the works. He eventually figured out this was just too much and toned it down significantly in the editing room. That said, Harlin still boasts that, at the time, Die Hard 2 killed more fictional people overall than any other action movie to that point.
That concludes our object lesson for this evening.
Maybe it's no wonder then that no airlines wanted to be attached to the film. Initially, the production tried to get actual airlines on board, but there were no takers, the thinking being that the movie made airport personnel look incompetent. Besides, which airline would want to see a model of one of their own planes crash into the runway in a fiery blaze? So the producers just made up some names, which was probably always the most reasonable decision to begin with.
Dulles Approach, this is Winter 114. Where the devil have you been?
As mentioned a little earlier, post-production was going to be extremely tough on Harlin, who would be supervising the editing of both Die Hard 2 and Ford Fairlane. The former's release date got pushed back a week and would now come out during the July 4th holiday. And Ford Fairlane, that was coming out on July 11th. Yes, Renny Harlin had 2 movies debut 1 week apart, which certainly had to have been a first.
Hey, you're that guy, the private eye.
You're a poet and didn't know it. Oh!
1990 was the summer of the sequel. In addition to Die Hard 2, there was Gremlins 2, Another 48 Hours, Back to the Future 3, RoboCop 2, Young Guns 2. You get the idea.
There's nothing left for me here.
All right, that's why you gotta come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.
Right.
During its first week of release, Die Hard 2 made $35 million, which was a very healthy sum in those days for an opening.
What's this about?
Oh, just a feeling I have.
Ouch. When you get those feelings, insurance companies start to go bankrupt.
It eventually ended up besting the first movie's box office tally, ending up with around $117 million domestic. Though the reviews were mixed, they tilted towards the positive. Perhaps most surprisingly, Siskel and Ebert both raved about it, with Siskel even putting it in his top 10 of the year.
Mightily impressed by every aspect of this movie. All I can say after having thought this summer was not that special is thank you to all involved.
I liked it very much, too. It's not the best movie of the summer. It's not as original as Dick Tracy, for one thing.
So is Die Hard 2 bigger or better than its predecessor? Depends on who you ask, although most people, of course, will say the first cannot be topped. It's our opinion that Part 2 is as enjoyable as the first. If nothing else, it was able to hold on to many of the attributes the first one contained while changing the game in an interesting way. McClane essentially became an unkillable machine after this one. And while Part 3 has its charms,
are you all right?
Yes. Laundry day.
the first 2 are where it's at. Great action movies with a terrific hero, truly repellent bad guys, and eye-popping set pieces that still hold up. Oh, and they're great Christmas movies too.
What the hell? It's Christmas!